Joe, I'm really, really glad to have you here. I know we've just gone from a conversation. Now I'm speaking to you like we're in the interview, but that's okay. I just wanted to let everybody know what we're doing here. So in the podcast, I'm making a lot of changes. One of those changes is I'm reaching out to people who I admire and believe should have more of a voice. And I'm saying, let's build a relationship over multiple episodes. Let's actually have long-term conversations, because I want to dive deeper into your mind, because I've never known anybody who can just rattle off important dates, names, people, events in as much detail as you, and you have such a rich historical understanding as well as a philosophical understanding. Bring that together with current events. You're kind of one of the few people who I trust to give me a very reasonable analysis of what's happening around the world at the moment. And so all this points to, Joe, I'm really excited to have you here, and I can't wait to carry on these conversations over many, many weeks.
Okay, it's my pleasure. Look, most of my insights come from making it to the age of 77. I've had a very full life. I've been very lucky. Got to go everywhere, do everything, meet important people. I got to bear testimony to things like Martin Luther King, and I was at Mandela's release, and I got to see things that maybe other people didn't see. On the other hand, I didn't see anything that an older generation of scholars and philosophers didn't see in the 1940s. So I had this kind of a ringside seat to the world. And Australian universities is where I've been for 48 years. And it was a nice place to be because it became a nice angle on perspective on how to see things. And so I had a very privileged position. And I always tell people, I sort of encourage universities to bring in diplomats and politicians and debrief them for the next generation. Now, Australians are very, very, universities are very jealous about bringing in politicians and diplomats. They don't like to do that. They like to bring in the occasional person. But, Harvard and University of Chicago and Stanford and London School of Economics and Oxford depend on bringing in people who've seen it, who've done it, and then, they can tell the next generation what they did. So the next generation at least has a handle on what they did.
Yeah.
And so I'm a big believer in that. And there are, I've always thought that I was about applied history. I mean, there's no sense studying history and its lessons unless you can see how it works out today or how you can apply it. And I always had a very rich dialogue for the past 50 years with important diplomats and others who I call reflective practitioners. Now, they're not all reflective practitioners. These are the people that make up the John Kennedy School or the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts. I've had the privilege of working with ambassadors. I've had the privilege of interviewing people who conducted, who cut the deal on the nuclear test ban treaty. And I spent a week with Averell Harriman, who was ambassador to the Soviet Union during the Second World War, and people like that. So you get these wonderful insights. And then, but Australian universities are not so hot about bringing in these people unless they can bring in some kind of money, which is ridiculous because I've encouraged universities to develop sort of visiting professorships, what Harvard calls professors in practice. Now, RMIT now has some professors in practice. I never got any credit for bringing the concept in, but that was my idea from hanging around Harvard and the Fletcher School of Law. I mean, I saw how it was done. And if you want these people to come in, you got to make it nice for them. You're not paying them any money, so you have to appeal to their vanity and to their historical contributions. So I got very lucky. I got to grow old, and I'm still working. I still write books. Written 4 books during the COVID.
Yeah,
crisis.
When you told me that last week, I thought, what the hell? I wrote 1 book during COVID, but not 4.
No, but you see, that's my way of combating cabin fever.
Yeah.
I've turned down 3 trips around the world the last couple of weeks. I go to conferences, security conferences and nuclear conferences, and keep getting these invitations, and I can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
I had to turn down New York and London and Vilnius. And I was taking 3 major trips a year, and you get to meet the diplomats, the scholars, and the security apparatus around the world. The last time I was in overseas in Vilnius, I was with all these EU diplomats and EU parliamentarians in these small countries that spend all this money once a year bringing in security experts. And I found out a very interesting thing. I was on a panel with the Ukrainian foreign minister, and no one there wanted to come to the aid of Ukraine. They were just obsessed with 2 things 18 months ago. They were obsessed with Donald Trump's tweets and with Brexit, how long it would be and what would be the aftermath of it. They weren't considering anything else. I mean, they're obsessed with these short running. So I got quite an insight into how these people are thinking. But look, I think the big event, now I know everybody knows that Kabul has fallen, Afghanistan, which was always a house of cards. But I've likened what happened in Afghanistan not to the exit of American influence in South Vietnam. We left in January 73, and in April 75, the North Vietnamese came down Highway 101. They smashed right through the gates of the presidential palace, which is there, by the way. If you go to Ho Chi Minh City, or formerly Saigon, you can see the presidential palace and where they came through the gates. It's all perfectly preserved in a museum. And what the Americans wanted in those days was a decent interval. It's very important to have a decent. It took about 2 years and a couple of months for the South Vietnamese, who were armed to the teeth, and they fought pretty well, but they couldn't match the North Vietnamese regulars coming down the road. And I noticed in these events, and I got obsessed in the last 11 days watching what was going on in Afghanistan. I was looking at raw feeds from Germany, just pictures of the streets and all this. And as I was watching all of this, it occurred to me that I wasn't looking at the end of the American experience in Saigon. What I was looking at was the Iranian Revolution. These guys come in, people run away, that's the leadership runs away, the commanders run away, and the foot soldier says, why should I die now? It's no one wants to be the last person to die defending against these. And of course, we had trained an army there in our image and likeness. What do I mean by that? Close air power, drones, massive armada of drones that we used, and there was a lot of backup. And when we left that big base with 5,000 people, the Afghan army got a little nervous because we were taking with us 18,000 contractors who serviced the Afghan Air Force and the like. And we left some people, I guess, but they got very nervous that the rug was being pulled out on them, as a matter of fact. Now President Biden comes along and says, I made this really tough decision. Well, he is responsible for managing the consequences of the end of the story. He didn't lose Afghanistan. What he did was he produced an indelible stain of shame on America about how this would end. Now, I never thought in my lifetime I would see a sadder ending than those people marooned on the roof of the American embassy.
Yeah.
But when I saw that young footballer fall off that C-17, that trumps everything, people clinging onto airplanes in hopes of getting out of the place. Now, the other thing too is I didn't believe in the invasion of Afghanistan in the first place. When 9/11 happened, and I was right on top of it with everybody else, I was watching Sandra Sully at 11:15 at night, and saw the plane and then another plane. I knew immediately it was Al-Qaeda, because they tried the same thing, trying to do same kinds of things at planes that summer. And I was on television and radio 37 times to reassure the Australian public what was going on. I had a pretty good handle on it. And this time, though, I didn't see those kinds of things. It seems to me, and the reason I opposed the invading Afghanistan was I thought the problem with Vietnam was we had entered a place to which we were culturally blind. We were blind to rice culture, Buddhism, and village mentality. Anytime you go charging around the world and you enter culturally blind, you're setting yourself up for the fall. Now, the famous Pentagon Papers, which weren't as dramatic as the papers that Julian Assange released, those operational documents, was a serious study commissioned by Robert McNamara, Secretary of Defense, about what was happening in Vietnam. So it was a study that looked at American policy from Franklin Roosevelt right up to the current time. And these policy documents, are these little histories, showed that America did what it could, or did whatever it could not to lose Vietnam, but it couldn't win Vietnam. So at the time, they were considered a freedom of expression kind of thing. And they were blown out of proportion. But the point was, America knew it couldn't win, but it could do enough not to lose. And that was the same policy that was going on in Afghanistan. They couldn't win, but they did enough not to lose it. And the other thing is that I thought when we were attacked on 9/11, we had two approaches. We could put a big yellow ribbon around 9/11, around the Trade Center and the Pentagon and others, and call it a crime scene. And we could pursue the perpetrators the same way we pursued the Lockerbie bombers when they blew up that Pan Am over Scotland. We went after them, and finally we got somebody who took credit for blowing it up, though I'm sure he was hand-chosen by the Libyan leadership themselves. The point is, we could have treated it as a police action. Instead, President Bush, and I don't say this lightly. I mean, he didn't know much about the world. In fact, the New York Times was trying to think of some way to call him dumb, so they called him incurious. It's a nice fancy word for just dumb. And he's surrounded by people filled with the hubris that came from what they thought was defeating Moscow-dominated communism. They thought they'd won the Cold War, which is another podcast. We didn't win the Cold War. The Soviets went home. That's what the Cold War was about. You know, the Reagan and Gorbachev decided to end the arms race. Gorbachev's reforms backfired. Perestroika and glasnost brought the Soviet system down. It was the unintended consequences of Gorbachev's reforms that ended the Soviet Union. But even Soviets today, former Soviets, whether dissidents or pro-Putin, still think America defeated them in the Cold. It's not true. It fell down by itself, as a matter of fact. So these people, filled with this hubris, decided to democratize the Middle East. And the regime change was on their mind in Iran, and they had to invent this little story about weapons of mass destruction. I always liked Saddam Hussein. You know, he was front and center. You know, he was a tyrant, but he was an authentic tyrant. You know, just before we invaded, 60 Minutes supposedly had this insight into him. Same kind of insight we had into Noriega before we invaded Panama. You have to demonize your enemy to the American public before you go after them. And in this 60 Minutes thing, it showed that he liked cigars, blondes, and scotch. And I thought, well, he can't be all wrong. I mean, that sounds pretty good to me. Anyway, they invented this weapons of mass destruction. Now, I know a lot about weapons of mass destruction. And while it's true he was on the cusp of getting one in 1990, it was clear to me and to anybody else he wasn't even close this time. But, you know, the commander-in-chief was conned by Dick Cheney as vice president and Donald Rumsfeld as defense secretary in believing that there was a mushroom cloud over the horizon. Now, what Bush did was not illegal. It was well within his purview to invade Iraq and Afghanistan. It was in his purview. He's commander-in-chief. He makes the last call. Was it dumb? Yes, it was incredibly dumb, because then you start to get into mission creep and all kinds of things. So the Iraqis were defeated very quickly. The Taliban were defeated very quickly. And, these are Stone Age, not Stone Age, they are medieval Islamist extremists. They adhere to Sharia law, and not even the fancy version of Sharia law, just what they think the Prophet set down. Okay, and Sharia law isn't bad in itself. There are very few recordings of people being stoned to death for adultery, or hands being amputated. In Sharia law, you need 4 witnesses for all this. I mean, who's going to, what person is stupid enough to let 4 people witness adultery? That is not going to happen. So anyway, you bring these people in. And the one thing about this mob is they're going to roll back all these so-called reforms over the past 20 years. So it's starting to look like a nightmare. But at the same time, when America starts getting into nation building, it's wrong for 2 reasons. Number one, you're not helping the people you think you're helping. And number 2, it's costing treasure and blood, a lot of treasure and blood. And so it was always a house of cards. I'm on record for this. A lot of people are too. And I opposed it, not because I'm opposed to intervention per se. I'm not one of these guys who's worried about what imperialism has done over the past 150 years. I opposed it because I knew we couldn't win. We just would never have the ability. The fact today that 20,000 interpreters are trying to get out of Afghanistan should give you an idea how stupid we were, because we needed 20,000 people to tell us what we were doing or who we were talking to. I always got a kick out of that. You need interpreters. So you got this, they used to be called the Comprador class. And so they want to go home with the losers. Anyway, we got into something over our heads. And then we didn't know how to let go of it. You've seen in your lifetime, your viewers will have seen things that are what my father used to call a lost cause. And, how do you cut your losses without breaking hearts? What kind of expectations have you set up? How long are you going to pay for it? And I don't believe when Biden says, we've been there 20 years, that's enough. My God, we've been in West Germany for 75 years. We've been in Japan for 75 years. We've been in Korea for 70 years. You don't call those a 70-year war. We have a stake in these places, and we're trying to stabilize the neighborhood, so to speak. So we could have stayed in Afghanistan, and it looked to me like even a residual force. And I think we could have had a footprint of maybe 800 men and women who would have given us an intelligence footprint. But by removing everybody, before you removed your friends and the other Americans and NATO folks there, strikes me as pretty dumb. In fact, I've been watching the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Abrams, just you can see he's chafing at the bit. He's very angry that they've given up all these advantages, particularly the base with 5,000, the base that made everything possible. Anyway, as I'm watching the feed, I'm watching it for about 8 hours. I'm completely reminded of the Iranian Revolution. The Shah leaves, all of his buddies leave, and the army doesn't really collapse. I was told by Iranian soldiers that the Shah asked them to put down their arms to save bloodshed. But there were still thousands of people killed by the Iranian revolutionaries. And tens of thousands of South Vietnamese were given education, re-education, which was really prison. So there's always a price to pay for this kind of thing. And then you get the installation of this Ayatollah. And the Ayatollah is pretty smart. He uses the students taking over the American embassy to consolidate the revolution. And then when it comes time to rule, he pushes the students and the radicals aside. He doesn't want them messing around with his theocracy. And with these guys too, these guys are going to be ruled by their religious experts who will interpret the law. Are they sophisticated enough to run a country? No, they're not. Afghanistan depends on outside donors and international aid. You know, they can get drawing rights in the International Monetary Fund, but only if they prove their bona fides. The American government has already frozen 9.5 billion of their dollars in the United States. They're not going to get any of this money. And the reason they're trying to behave so well right now is because they can't run the show. You know, you can't pay for anything because the services and the lights are going to go off very, very quickly. In a way, the Taliban are in a bind. You know, they have a mission in life. At the same time, they want to be presentable to the international community. And you can't do that. I mean, if you can't control your foot soldiers out in the provinces who are going door to door, and they're doing terrible things. I mean, after a 20-year war, I don't care what country you're talking about, there's payback. Even when the Germans were thrown out of occupied France, the French turned around and slaughtered 10,000 collaborators. I mean, they gunned them down in the street for collaborating with the German grocer or the butcher or whatever it is. You know, people, they vent. So some of this stuff you can't really control. Yeah. So what I'm watching is not this great event. What I'm watching is a Greek tragedy. Now, to me, a Greek tragedy is something that's unfolding before your eyes about which you can do nothing. Okay, that's what other people have definitions of Greek. To me, that's what a Greek tragedy is. It was like a train wreck in slow motion, and we couldn't do a damn thing about it without sending back the troops. And even if we sent back the troops, he wouldn't do it. And so I'm watching this thing unfold, and I'm watching all these young people put down their guns because they don't want to be the last person killed in the Civil War, in the war, the Afghan war. When I was a Vietnam age, and 27 million young men my age, we were all Vietnam. We were all drafted or excused or whatever it is. And no one wanted to be the last person who died in the Vietnam War, you know, the last 6 months of the war.
Yeah.
We want to get drafted. And if we're over there, we want to get killed. Now, there's a guy named Livingston who was the first guy killed in 71, but we didn't want to be the last person. I'm sorry, in 61. We didn't want to be the last person known as being killed. So these people put their stuff down, their guns down, and they decided they're not cowards. I mean, up till now, the Afghan army has suffered 65,000 deaths. I mean, they fought like hell. Now, some people say they only fought for a wage. You know, they were being paid for by the Americans. They're fighting for a pay packet. Well, there have been a lot of armies that fight for pay packets and 3 meals a day. I mean, that's no big deal. But the point is that once this appeared to dry up, and let's face it, if you see your commander in chief headed to the airport in 4 cars, and you don't need 4 cars to go to the airport, probably had bags full of money and all the rest of it. God bless him. You know, he just got off with what he could. And he's right about one thing when he gave that interview. He said, when I left, he said he saved lives. He probably did. There might have been people who fought for him towards the end, you know, and put down your arms, and you're at the mercy of these people. So now we got an administration in Washington that has this indelible stain of shame on it because it's handled this very badly. As I say, President Biden is responsible for how this thing ends. And keep in mind the famous line by Barack Obama when he was vice president in charge of relations and foreign policy projects. Anyway, and I'm not being vulgar on your show, but this was a quote from President Obama's memoirs. Obama used to tell his allies that Joe, meaning Joe Biden, has the ability to fuck things up. And you know, you got a Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, who said years ago that he's been wrong on every foreign policy issue. So he comes back into office saying America is back. And now America's allies in Europe say, yeah, America's back. They're showing their back to their allies. When we bugged out of Afghanistan, we forgot to tell anybody.
Mm.
We just, and that's what nations do. They do things in terms of self-interest. When America got out of Vietnam, the last country to find out was Australia.
Yeah.
Okay, this is what we're going to do. Now you follow suit. And so this idea of America is now a steady ally doesn't look so steady anymore. But that's just by the by. I think we've got rid of a huge problem. That is, we couldn't fix it. Did we leave properly? No. You have no right to yell fire in the theater on your way out the door, because you're going to create that panic. And now the United Nations and others are saying that we should take out all these people who profited by 20 years of enlightened government, women journalists, women lawyers, women educators, and all this stuff. So we have an obligation to them. And the Taliban, they don't want to see their women leaving. It's not because they're mean. It's because there is in the Quran and in the teachings in the sayings of Muhammad and in their courts, women have a very special place. Now, when they're not depriving them of an education, they're trying to protect them in their primitive way. So they don't. Their cry right now is, we don't want our women going to the Americans. Well, I understand that in a primitive sense. I know what you're talking about. But now everybody wants to hop on this escape thing, and they don't want to lose all their brains. These are smart people, but they do have a hit list. They are going door to door, and they're settling scores, just the way the French did after the Germans left, just the way everybody does. And let me tell you, when the North defeated the South, there was no talk about an interim government. There was no talk about shared responsibility. The North subjected the South to all kinds of things. They took away their property, that is their homes and their slaves, and never gave them any money. And people forget that the Arlington National Cemetery was Robert E. Lee's plantation. And that was a lesson to everybody else, that we're going to take what we want. So the winner takes what they want, and the loser, And here we go back to the great Millian dialogue. That the powerful do what they will, and the weak do what they must. This is the nature of the beast. And, human nature, like Thucydides' world, hasn't changed in 2,500 years. I can understand this. So they have kind of a mindset that they won, and they did. But they're not quite sure what they want. They think they want over a society that has changed in the last 20 years. Are they going to be able to control a society that's literate on social media and stuff like that? Can women do this and that? Probably not, and it's going to get kind of ugly. But right now we're looking at the end game. But anyway, as I saw it, it looked more like the Iranian Revolution than it did the fall of Vietnam, which was South Vietnam, which is sad enough.
Well, this is certainly it's really the main reason why I've been so drawn to hearing your perspective on these things, because even something that you said at the very start of the interview, you mentioned that you hadn't seen anything in your lifetime that the people didn't see in the 40s, and so you're already thinking, okay, we're thinking in terms of patterns, because patterns are far more important than necessarily the specific details. Patterns will show you what is going to happen and what that actually means. And, I'm fascinated in your analysis of all these things, because you're drawing it to Greek tragedy and then Iran and Vietnam, and you can pull in all these resources that can help us to see those patterns over time. And so I'm wondering, what do you think this ultimately means for America at the moment, and also in the near future? I mean, are they going to have to start looking for another war to spend all their money on? And what do you think happens from here?
Well, if you watch the American shows, MSNBC, Fox, you'd think that the world has come to an end. And the American empire will never recover. When the British lost the North American colonies in the 1780s, they came back to create the largest empire that ever existed. This will be a pause. America's got this burden off. They can go on to the next thing. And I've argued that America has never won an intervention. Nobody wins an intervention. As soon as you insert yourself in a civil war, when you got to pick up sides, you never really win these things. As I like to say, I met a lovely Irish scholar once in New Zealand, and we were having a beer with some people, Guinness, at a pub in Dunedin. And she looks at the beer and she says, Guinness just doesn't travel. It's not the same. And I said to her, it's the same thing about American democracy. It just doesn't travel. It's the wrong place for this kind of a thing. And, they had the 90-year-old Gorbachev today saying that Americans should have called it a day 10 years ago. He said, we couldn't do anything with the place when the Russians were there. And then he said that spreading the democratic model has no relevance in that part of the world, which is tribal-based and the rest of it. The Taliban didn't make up this stuff. They took advantage of how people think there and what they feel and all the rest of it. They're close to the soil. So it's now America's relieved of this, and they can go back to preparing for war with Russia or China or Iran. America does much better with nation states. Now, this does not mean American military has been degraded. I mean, does anybody want to mess with an F-18? I don't think so. I mean, trying to change a society is a lot different from waging a war against another nation state. So America will continue to build up against the threat from China, which doesn't have to really be a threat. I mean, my whole theory about China is that it's not a rising power, it's a declining ideology. And what they're doing now is out of desperation. It's not out of aggression. And that I argued that from my years of study in Vienna, studying comparative communist systems only last about 70 years, which, by the way, coincides with the average length of a dynasty in China's 249 dynasties. So people like Xi are worried about surviving. And, the great event of the 20th century, last part of the 20th century, was the collapse of Moscow-dominated communism. This drove the Chinese communists into great thought about their future. What was it? They spent billions of dollars trying to figure out what it was. Was it bureaucracy? Was it corruption? Whatever it was, because they know they can go that way too. Interestingly, a Bolshevik Russia lasted 74 years. So there's my 70. And my argument is that after 5 generations, it's very hard to get the 5th or 6th generation filled with the fervor of the early revolutionaries. It's impossible. That's why they all fail, because they can't pass it on. And Xi, of course, is trying to reinfect it or reboot it with this call for nationalism and the call for the party and all the rest of it. He's doomed to failure. Now, I reckon that the Chinese will have regime change in the next 5 years, but it'll be internal. And the leaders will not be communists, but they'll be nationalists. And since all communists are nationalists anyway, that's easy. When I go across Europe and I meet people who were former big shots in communist countries, and I always say, who's running the show now? And they say nationalists. Same people. Just become nationalists. So we can pretend there's going to be a war with China. Now, there isn't going to be a war with China unless there's an accident. And it's not going to be over Taiwan. No one in America is going to fight for Taiwan. We settled that with the Shanghai Communique in 1972. So when I hear Australians thinking about going to war over Taiwan, they don't know any history. And number two, you're talking crap. No one in America is going to go to war over that. What they will go to war for is freedom of navigation. if there is a conflict in the South China Sea in an international sea lane, that'll be the problem. I once got to provide a workshop, a critique, to a bunch of exclusive communists who were in Melbourne, all very close to the leadership, and they wanted a critique of the Belt and Road. You know how the Chinese kind of go into self-flagellation once in a while. So they asked me to do it. Actually, they asked another guy to do it, but since he's a friend of China and has done a lot of work with them, he didn't want to wear it, so he gave it to me to do. I said, okay.
Yeah, okay.
And I didn't take any money for it. I just gave him a 2-hour lecture on what's wrong with the Belt and Road. I said, you're acting like British imperialists and American gunboat diplomacy in the 1920, called dollar diplomacy, etc. And I said to them, look, I know you're going to take everything in the South China Sea, the gas, the oil, the fish. I said, I don't care about that. We can't stop you from doing that. I said, but when Admiral Harris at the time headed the 7th Fleet, I said, when Admiral Harris wants to go through international waters, I said, you let him go. And I said, if you don't, there's your enemy. It's not Donald Trump or Biden or anybody. It's the American Navy. The American Navy has always been the ultimate guarantor. America's freedom of the seas is built into the American DNA. From the 1790s with the Barbary pirates, the war in 1812. The only reason we went to war against the Germans, because the ruthless submarine warfare. The only reason we went to war with the Japanese, ruthless naval warfare. And I point out to people that the PLA Navy, that is the Chinese Navy, has taken a great deal of money the last couple of years with the task, the remit is to take on the American Navy, which is the same suicide mission that the Japanese Navy took on in the 1930s. And the Japanese Navy, the leaders there, confessed after the war, they knew they couldn't beat America. And if these guys running the Chinese Navy thought about it, they can't beat the American Navy. And the Japanese Navy knew they couldn't beat America, but they took the money because to save face, they couldn't give the money back. They were given a job they couldn't handle. And so they knew they were going to go into that. So I said, you're going to have the same experience as this. And this, the Chinese guys were supposed to listen to me very carefully and politely, but they weren't very polite when I was done. They said, you're trying to humiliate us and all. I said, look, I'm from the south side of Chicago. I said, I don't care who's done what to you. It means nothing to me. And I said, and I know you're going to take everything you want to take, and we're not going to fight you over fish and gas. But I said, when an American Navy vessel wants to go into international waters, get out of the way, okay? Because then you're going to have war in your hand. Oh, we can destroy aircraft carriers with a single missile. I said, you destroy an aircraft carrier, and you're going to have all these submarines, these Ohio-class submarines with their 220 nuclear-tipped missiles. I said, every city in China is going to be bombed because you're stupid, okay? Americans don't want war. You don't want war. What they want is the fruits of war, as that great Chinese philosopher says that all the battles are won before they start. That's exactly what they want. They want the fruits of war. But I said, you don't mess with the Navy. You can mess with anybody else. And the guy saw my point, and I was quite crude with him because he was crude with me. But after that, we became buddies. We had a cup of coffee. We all understood each other. And then he invited me to come to Beijing. And I said, no, it's okay. I want to go to Europe. I don't want to go to Beijing. But the point is, these patterns you talk about do repeat themselves. And Freud says unless we're able to arrest these things, we are condemned to pursue this deathly behavior over and over again. He's right, and of course all he did was tap into ancient philosophy and ancient history. He could see that as an educated man, that these patterns repeat themselves. So while there's going to be a lot of short-term weeping and gnashing of teeth over the loss of how Afghanistan fell, I think in the long run it isn't going to stop the American empire from growing or getting better or becoming stronger. And
Would you say it's more of
sure,
a moment of mourning for them, where they're kind of finally waking up fully to the fact that this was a big waste of time?
Yeah, I mean, this has got all the impact of a refrigerator falling off the back of a delivery truck. Okay,
That's
we're not going to get
analogy.
We're not going to get the refrigerator. We'll get another refrigerator. Okay, and the thing is, we left them all these weapons, but they don't know how to fix them. They don't know how to keep them going. You know, they're like these 1950 cars from Cuba. You know, we left them all these weapons, but they don't have any maintenance, and we're taking the 18,000 contractors with us. So you can have a great arm, you can have a great arsenal, but you know, if you can't work it, you can't work it. But America will go on, and it will continue to prepare for potential combat in this so-called era of resurgence of great power competition. Now, great power competition was a phrase invented by some guys that I know. You know, these young guys like you know, 20s, 30s, they're at Harvard and Yale, and they're working for the Defense Department as contractors. They're writing policy.
That's not like
papers.
me, but I'll go along with it.
No. You know, where the younger people got all these bright ideas, okay?
Yeah.
And so they come along, and they're in the post-Cold War world, which we never knew what to call, you know, unipolar. You know, America was in charge of everything. Baloney. You know, America couldn't get the North Vietnamese to surrender when we had all the air power. We couldn't bend the will of communist Cuba. This idea about American invincibility as a unipower is some dumb thing created by political scientists who don't know any history, which is another story. So anyway, they came along and they didn't know what to call the post-Cold War world. So what they called it was the recrudescence of great power competition. America is no longer in control. America has never been in control, okay? You know, it's been the first among equals, primus inter pares, always been the first among equals, but it was never in control. I mean, as I said, we couldn't get people we couldn't bend the will of the North Koreans or anybody. I got all these experiences, Cuba, North Korea, Vietnam, you know. As soon as you're up against a fanatical enemy who has suicidal tendencies, you find out that bullets can't match ideas, okay? Not to mention ideology. And Americans aren't stupid. They're not going to throw themselves into the breach over and over again. So while there'll be great lamentation, and let me tell you, there's going to be hell to pay for Biden. What Biden has done is he's lost the 2022 congressional elections. People say, well, you know, there's a Democratic majority of 3 seats. Let me tell you, as soon as the Republicans take over the House of Representatives, you are going to see articles of impeachment for Joe Biden. Okay, they're going to go after him, hammer and tongue. Going after Trump because you have the numbers was a really dumb idea.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the first impeachment didn't work, so they tried the second one. And this commission on January 6th, the insurrection, that's the third impeachment. That's not going to work either. None of this works. But what they've done is they now have all the reason in the world to go after Biden, and they will. American politics is about the numbers. As soon as you get your 217 votes in the House, you can impeach a ham sandwich, okay? Doesn't make any difference what the charges are, whether they're going to stick around. You can impeach people. And you force the Senate to have a trial. And so there's going to be, Biden has literally handed the Republicans this victory by looking incompetent. Now, I'm not going to say he was incompetent. But when you're the commander in chief, it's not just the buck stops there. That's the famous sign on Harry Truman's desk. It either looks like he didn't have the right intelligence, and that's shame on the intelligence community, or he had the intelligence and didn't use it. Now he's surrounded by a Secretary of State and a security advisor and all kinds of people around him. All these bright guys I'm talking about who always got A's in college, who don't know anything about the world, who thought that you could just put this pressure on people. They don't understand how things work, because they have no military experience. They have no scholarly experience. What they have is mostly failures from the first Obama administration. Almost all of his advisors are leftovers, or human rights leftovers, or women's advocates leftovers, or whatever it is. People who worked as aides and et cetera. It's the crowd. It's the band that's come back together, and they have no particular expertise. And when this happens, you've seen these guys on television trying to explain what's going on, and even MSNBC and Good Morning Joe and all those guys, they've attacked these people for stupidity. Even pro-Biden's channels have to see the light here. There's something wrong, and of course, the right-wing channels have no problem who the enemy is.
Yeah.
And so the president's going to bring down the party. That is, they're going to lose a couple of elections, and guess who's going to run for president? Sure as God made little green apples, Donald Trump is going to run for president again, and he is going to become the 47th president of the United States. He's got the base, he's got the optics right now, and people even say, well, he may have signed that agreement with the Taliban, but it was conditional, and he certainly wouldn't have ridden it into the nowhere kind of thing. I think America's interest in countering or in intervening and countering terrorism in terms of mission building, I think it's over. I think, and it's always been over because it never wins anyway. We did the same thing in South Vietnam. We did the same thing in places like Mexico, Cuba in the 1890s, early 1900s. We tried to do all these things. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
So
people have to know, just quickly, people have to know that they heard the prophecy here first that Trump's going to get in 3.5 years. We're going to have to come back to this in 3.5 years and have another conversation. And
well, the other thing you heard here is that I think China will suffer regime change, but it'll be internal. They're going to beat each other up.
Yeah.
Because Xi can't deliver on these things. And so we're going to have this massive change. China's not going to be nicer. Nationalists will be in control. But that kind of thing. And the other thing, too, is that there are some things we should be cooperating on, like climate change, for example. And America needs China to denuclearize North Korea. Now, North Koreans are never going to give you their nuclear weapons. Trump knew that. Biden doesn't know that. Biden wants them to give up their weapons. There's not a chance in hell they're going to give up their weapons. I always like what Trump did with Chairman Kim. He called him into Singapore, and they had a hamburger together. And he says to him, in a private meeting, which is no one in the Democratic Party wanted to do that. He says to him, "You can keep your nuclear weapons, just don't point them at me, or else." Now, this is the first time I've ever felt sorry for Chairman Kim in my lifetime. If Kim didn't give Trump enough, Trump had the Seventh Fleet coming right down on North Korea. No doubt about it. These armadas were out there. If he didn't give Trump enough, he was going to have a war with the United States, which he was going to lose very quickly. And if he gave him too much, the military would put a bullet in the back of his head. People think that Chairman Kim runs North Korea. It's the military that runs North Korea. They only tolerate him. He does what they want. When he wakes up in the morning without a bullet in his head, he must feel like a lucky guy. He knows he could disappear overnight.
Yeah.
He knows if there could be a regime change. It isn't going to be a bunch of South Korean commandos. It's going to be his own military that puts with a sad announcement that he died in his sleep. Yeah, not much chance of that. So Trump had an angle on some of this stuff, and I didn't like some of his other policies, and I don't like his barnyard morals. I could see that they spoke the same language, but Trump would have handled this differently because they would have been a little frightened of double crossing him.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair to the, instead of just imagining the Americans lost Afghanistan. Let's imagine for a minute that the Taliban won. They get an A plus. Psychological warfare. They got the right bona fides this time. They're saying all the right things. And in 20 years, it looks like half of those guys at the top have got media and communication degrees somewhere. Maybe they did some correspondence course while in Guantanamo or someplace. They seem to understand the press. The way Chairman Kim, North Korean leader, comes out and he's playing the press like a banjo, for God's sakes. These guys understand the value of the media. So they use the media. And the media can't get enough of these people. So the Taliban are going to promise us the earth until we go away. And the Americans aren't going to go away until everybody's out of the city that they want. Now, I hear there might be as many as 10,000 contractors left behind. There might be as many as 10,000 Americans in the interior. There's those who work for NGOs and INGOs and things like that. How do you get them out? Well, I think there's going to be enormous pressure. You see, if the Taliban really want to run a nation, they might find themselves at war with the United States of America, not just as a terrorist unit. They want to pick a fight. They're going to have a fight on their hands. And I heard this morning that the Americans, and the Secretary of Defense, has introduced over the skies of Kabul F-18 fighter jets armed to the teeth. These are used for close cover. These can do terrible damage. And, a whole lot of Taliban leadership can disappear. I mean, he's intimidating them. If they're really smart, they will take the Americans and the contractors and anybody who wants to get out of town. They will take them to the airport in buses and wave goodbye to them. But if the Americans, they get obsessed with prisoners and leaving anybody behind. We could have defeated the Iranian Revolution in 10 minutes. But when they took those hostages at the embassy, Jimmy Carter squandered his presidency trying to get them back. Americans become possessed about retrieving prisoners or the remains of prisoners. We get very sentimental about people who are taken or whose bones we can't repatriate. Americans don't spend that kind of money on you in your lifetime when you're dying in Chicago or Cleveland. But God help you, if you are taken, they move heaven and earth to bring you back. So how could Biden leave Kabul with thousands of Americans in the city or in the interior? So I got a prediction that something bad is going to happen in the next 72 hours because the guys on the street, those are Taliban fighters. These are hardcore guys. The baseball hats, the Nike shoes, and the shiny AK-47s. I mean, this is the killing machine on the ground. And they're not really nice to people who want to go through checkpoints. They chased a CNN lady who didn't have a hijab on her, covered her head. I mean, they're going to get very serious about some things. And Biden's going to he's painted himself into a corner right now. He wants to leave, but he doesn't know how to leave. And everybody can see that leaving, moving the military out first and then coming back for the civilians, just doesn't look smart. That's an F- on an exam. That I don't care what's going on in your head. That just doesn't make any sense to anybody. And so that's what's going to hurt him in the next election. So, but
you're thinking that as soon as all the military out, that's when the Taliban, what I've heard, and again, I'm such an idiot when it comes to all of this stuff, but I have heard that there is this opinion that as soon as America is all out, that's when the heads are going to start rolling. That's when they'll go and start making examples of people who were against the Taliban throughout all of this or were working with the Americans. Do you see that sort of thing happening?
Well, I told you that after occupied France fell, the French went out
Yeah.
and slaughtered 10,000 of their own people. This is a natural urge
Yeah.
to get rid of these people. You know, and you got 250 women who are judges in the judiciary. That's not on. You got all these great women who are doctors and lawyers and stuff like that. That's not on. I mean, there's going to be some payback in these things, and a lot of things are going to happen off camera. Okay, it's going to happen off camera. But can we use hard power to achieve the same things we used to use with soft power? Can we make them treat women and children and education any better than? Can we pound them into this? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so. And that's not going to work. And there's going to be a heavy price to pay. But the American, you know, when people say this is the end of the America as a superpower, no, I don't think so. America still has 6,350 nuclear weapons, all kinds of delivery systems. And, you know, I don't know exactly where you live, but America can send a drone through your window in the next 10 minutes if they wanted to.
Yeah.
And it could blow the whole building down. You know, when you got that kind of reach, you're not out of business yet. You know, this is a situation that's been built on a house of cards. It's like that building that fell down in Florida. Who knew it was built on crummy foundations? Maybe we should have known. Everything in Florida is reclaimed land anyway. And so Afghanistan goes back to what it was, and you know, and once again we're going to have Taliban talking about people will conveniently convert to whatever they want them to be, and you know they want to live, and personal security becomes more important than anything else. They're going to have to put their dreams aside, but it's not like the American superpower has ended. No, this is not it at all. In fact, people at Fox and those places say that China and Russia will take advantage of America's weakness. And that would be a mistake because after the Bay of Pigs in 1961, which Kennedy inherited from David Eisenhower, which was a total failure, not unlike what Biden is saying, he inherited this from Trump. After that was the death-defying politics of the Cuban Missile Crisis, where we came that close to nuclear conflict. So, you know, we go from a humiliating loss to doubling down the next time with the big players. So, you know, it's going to get a little worse down the road here.
Yeah.
If we let it be that way. So anyway, people in America will tell you that this is a terrible thing and we should have seen it coming, and maybe we should have seen it coming. But it isn't going to end American ambitions the same way the loss of the North American colonies did not end the British Empire. It actually became a breathing space for the next British Empire, which was 10 times bigger than the first one. So it's just a pause in this line of development. So, But I think America knows it can't intervene in these wars. It has a very poor record. Everybody does. Whether the French, when the French intervened in the Algerian Civil War, or the French in Indochina, it always fails because you just can't pick sides in a civil war. It just doesn't work. On the other hand, if a nation threatens you, another nation, then you know exactly what you have to do. So America will go back to defending its national interests. It's identified its problems. The number one problem for America is China. Number two problem is Russia. Number three problem is Iran. Number four problem is North Korea, which would I make the first problem, because North Korea is a loose cannon with nuclear weapons across a very dangerous peninsula. So I would make North Korea first. Do we have a way of dealing with it? Well, the Biden people don't. But when you, there was a Bob Dylan song when I was a kid, and had a bunch of cue cards flying while he was singing. And he says in the song that nothing succeeds like success. If you are successful, you're in Fat City, he used to say. But if you're a failure, And I used to love what Abraham Lincoln, his famous line was, defeat is an orphan. Victory has many fathers. So, Biden is looking overwrought. He's obviously botched it. He's going to have to wear the stain of this. And now he's starting to look like he's not empathetic. Oh, these people, they didn't fight. And what he's saying is, you're on your own. Well, you might be on your own, but that's not what you say exactly. You try to be as sympathetic as possible. He hoped for that decent interval. Some Russian guy was saying, at least it took the Taliban 2 or 3 years after the Russians left. In the case of the Americans, they seized the country while the Americans are still there.
Yeah.
What are we going to do next? And what do? You hit a nail with a B-52. I mean, how do you respond to this? But I'm not worried about the equipment or all this stuff. I mean, the Taliban are completely dependent on the international community for money, international aid money. They can't get the IMF money. They can't get the American money out of the central bank system, the central bank money. They can't get it from the Brits or anyplace else. Will anyone deal with them? Yeah, the Chinese will deal with them. Because as we all know from high school physics, that nature abhors a vacuum. The Chinese will move in as soon as they think the country's stable and peaceful for a minute. They'll do a deal with Belt and Road, probably. They very much want that lithium that's there, plus all the other precious metals. The Chinese want a deal from the Taliban. They want to make damn sure the Taliban, Afghanistan, does not become a launching pad to assist their Muslim community in China. Okay. So same thing with the Russians. Taliban actually was home to a lot of Chechen fighters, and the Russians aren't going to be nice to these people. And of course, the Iranians, who are Shia, are at loggerheads with these people anyway. And the Iranians will get involved as long as they behave themselves. So not only are we, but the nations that will reach out to them are still looking for something from the Taliban to show them their bona fides. So they're going to have to play all grown up here. Can they do it? Well, I think they can. The leadership can, because, they've been taking their PR courses. But can the rank and file do it? No, these are just rural kids, illiterate, who won a war, and it's time to kick ass. They got their lists, they got their villages, their districts. They know who they're going to target. Now, look, my people all came from Sicily, where they carried vendettas around for hundreds of years. These people aren't different, So the guys at the operational level may not get the memo on this one. Now, today, thinking we might talk about the Taliban, or somebody else will ask me, I took a crash course this morning. I took a 1-hour module on Sharia law, where it comes from. How much from the Quran and how much from the Prophet's sayings, and then the courts. Sharia law is fuzzy, and it's got a lot of positive attitudes. And everything before it's considered ignorant, before these things came down. And the Taliban doesn't have much to work with. When they say they are fundamentalists, Islamic extremists or fundamentalists, the Sharia law for them is cut and dry. Though there will be a large group of scholars there who will interpret the law. I mean, there are a lot of things that have evolved since the 7th century. They'll interpret these things. And, the 7th century guys didn't say anything about television, radio, or rock and roll, these things will disappear. But, these guys see the world in black and white, not unlike the evangelicals in the United States, by the way. They also see things in black and white. It's not like these guys are brand new, this black and white version of the earth. We got the same thing in America, and every society has the black and white people. If you've lived a little bit of life, or if you know anything about anything, you realize that life, history, love, everything takes place in a gray zone. Sometimes you have to compromise, or you have to adapt yourself. These guys don't seem very adaptive to me. You know, the frontline guys. You know, they got their list. They're going to go around, and you know, I understand they killed one woman after knocking on her door 4 times. It's been corroborated by the CNN. They knocked on her door the 4th time, and they told her to feed the 15 of them. That's their platoon. She said she didn't have enough food for them. So they killed her. And then they threw a grenade on top of her. And they go to house and they take cars. They take cash. New cars, motorcycles. You know, these cars they drive around, and they're not just all Humvees. They're driving around people's cars.
Yeah.
You know, this is what happens when you go to war. You can take anything you want. And that's, you know, part of the deal. That's how you kept a lot of soldiers in the middle in Rome happy, because they got to pillage cities when they got there. They got to take what they wanted. Same thing with this crowd. They're going to take what they want. And so as long as you have very brave women covering events, this Jane Ferguson, who sometimes works for PBS and does a lot of work and very brave journalist. Irish journalists always make brave journalists, and it's just stupid about danger. She's going to be recording these things. And this is going to play very heavily on the evening news about this happened yesterday and this happened yesterday. And you get a lot of people lamenting that we're not getting these women out. And today some woman at the UN said we should get out every woman who has a degree or a medical degree, who's been a judge, or any woman who has who has benefited from this period of enlightenment. Well, how do you do that? You know, you can't clear the place out. And Afghanistan isn't some pokey town. You know, Melbourne is nearly 5 million, and Sydney's nearly 5 million. Chicago's 2.5 million. Greater Chicago's 9 point. New York is about 8 million, 9 million. Greater New York is, of course, 26 million. There are 38 million people in Afghanistan. How does a ragtag army of fundamentalists get these people to march in a straight line? This is going to be a trick. And I got a hunch they're going to turn a little more to violence as soon as these international cameras are turned off. I could easily see them opening fire and all the rest.
Yeah.
And they take their obligation very seriously. They're going to say, "No, we won this thing, and now we have to consolidate our victory. These people have to pay attention." And there are a lot of people in Afghanistan who are not Muslims of this particular stripe. There are Shia there. There are other cults there. There are Christians and whatever else you have there. And there are a lot of Shia, what's left of them anyway. As I say, Iran has a very bad history with these people. They actually massacred Iranian diplomats in their time. So there are all these long memories. So how are you going to manage this? They're saying all the right things in the press conference. They're going to require a very sympathetic public to work with them. And the only way that's going to happen is if they offer the public something that is valuable to them, like their lives. If you say to people, you can keep your lives, your livelihood, and your dignity, let's all work together. For what? For a single Afghanistan. Well, Afghanistan doesn't exist. It's a geographical expression. It's a series of tribes. It's one of these damn things, the British wrote on a map. These are one place called Afghanistan. Well, the guy in the tribal leader in the north doesn't care about what happens in Kabul. He has no loyalty to the federal government. That's why the place fell like a row of dominoes. There's no loyalty out in the country for what's going on in Kabul. So you got this kind of urban population, predominantly rural population. Can they all get on the same page? I doubt it. So it's going to be very rough around the edges. But as long as the media is there, they're not going to stop them from doing what they're going to do. They're going to stop them from doing worse than they're planning on doing. Yeah. As soon as the cameras have gone away, I said on Chinese, I got a Chinese show. I do work in Beijing, believe it or not. As critical as I am of the Chinese foreign policy. They invite me on every couple of weeks. And I pointed at, they wanted to know if they're hoping that the Taliban are different than the last crowd. And I just reminded them, I love going to zoos. I've never seen a leopard change his spots. I've been to a lot of zoos in the world. Sometimes I go back over and over again. And the leopard still has his spots. Now, these guys are as wedded to violence as original sin. This is the way they're built. You know, they're built to enforce their will. And the idea of them being more inclusive and open. When, you know, people today are talking about an inclusive government. What are we talking about? They forcibly seized the government. They broke the deal at Doha. That's where Trump would have been on their backs right there. Okay? Yeah. He would never have closed that base. Never have closed the base. They forcibly have taken the government. There ain't going to be any deals, any inclusion or interim government or that kind of thing. Taliban are going to give orders, and if people want to cooperate, they can live and maybe keep what they got. If they don't, they become enemies of the Taliban. And so the Taliban are in a bind right now because I know what they want to do to people, but to get money that is the international aid money, to get money that's frozen, and to get the donor money, they're going to have to behave themselves. And can they do that? I don't know if they have the ability to do that, but that's the bind that they're in. The bind the Americans are in is to get everybody out who says they want to get out and make it look like it happened. It isn't going to happen because a lot of people are going to be left behind.
Yeah.
And when we left Vietnam, I was very sad. I mean, because I know a lot of those people work for us. We took 130,000. America took 130,000 South Vietnamese. That's probably as many people as want to go from Kabul, maybe even a little bit more. And you know, where do you settle them? You know, Newark, New Jersey, suburbs of Chicago, Nebraska, Tacoma, Washington. Where do they go? You know, what are you going to do with maybe 200,000 refugees? Where do you put them? And do you notice that when the Taliban were running all over Afghanistan, nobody was wearing a mask? It's like COVID doesn't bother anybody there. And I was thinking, are people dying of COVID there and we don't know about it? Or have they got herd immunity that we don't know about? But, you know, the point is I don't think and the Turks don't want any more. The Turks got millions of refugees. Before I came on, I saw that President Erdogan said that he doesn't want to become the next immigration or refugee storage unit for Europe.
Yeah. And
he could let those 3 million people go. The Pakistanis, who've been playing a double game all along, they have at least 1.5 million registered refugees, probably another million. There are probably 1 million refugees in India. And people are trying to go through any border they can. And so what we have is probably 1/10 of the population is on the move. 1/3 of Afghans, at 38 million, are suffering food insecurity. These people don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yeah. And when the money dries up, the public services, the lights, the electricity, the toilets, I don't know, everything's going to go offline. So you're going to get the degrading of services to the people. And we're going to have a very sad-looking country very shortly. Yeah. Because if you can't keep the grid going, terrible things are going to happen, as a matter of fact. So we're going to see this terrible image. And, you know, we pray for all these people. But you know what? If you know your history, when you lose a war, you got to come to terms with the results. And there was a woman that John Hersey interviewed in Hiroshima after the bomb, in his famous book, Hiroshima, which started out as a series of articles. And she says about the bomb, she says, we followed our government into war. we could have expected this if we lost. Very philosophical.
Mm.
And remember those people in Milos I told you about when the Athenian general goes to them? He says, stop aiding Sparta. And the the Melian leader says, we'll think about it. And the Athenian admiral says, no, you won't think about it. The powerful do what they can. The weak do what they must. Well, for what most people don't know is how the story ended. The men were killed. The women and children were sold into slavery. Properties were burned and the land was salted. That's what you get for not accepting reality. Sometimes when I was a kid, I used to look at all these people in the Soviet bloc. And then when I was a student in Vienna, I traveled the Soviet bloc, Bulgaria, Romania, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Soviet Union, Poland. And I look at all these vibrant people stuck under the Soviet flag and domination. And I said, how can you tolerate this? And I was about 19, 20, and I heard the expression the first time, better red than dead. So these people are going to have to figure out how to survive until the next time. And there's only so much that we can do. We can't take everybody out. The idea that we can take out every soul and put them somewhere. What people don't realize is that when you take these people away from their roots, that 90% of them will resent it within a year. And their children will resent it. Those are the kids that blew up the Patriots' Day race in Boston. 2 Chechen kids from Chechen refugees, people who feel the resentment of having left their country and the displacement. Yeah. And when you displace all these people, they become, in the words of Oscar Hanlon's The Uprooted, they become perennial sojourners. They're not going to become Europeans or Australians or Americans. They'll be perennial sojourners. They'll vote in these countries and whatever they have to do. But they'll always dream about home every day. That'll be the dream they go to bed with. So in a way, by yanking these people out of there, we're not giving them a chance to solve the problem. They're all going to tell you they're going to be killed. Well, the Taliban isn't going to kill everybody, are they? And maybe they do. They don't care if they go into the dark ages. They're halfway there anyway. But when you bring all these people and you save them, they may not thank you for it down the road. Or as we all learned in high school by reading our famous essays by 19th century American authors, you never forgive the giver, according to Ralph Waldo Emerson. You never forgive the person who saves you because you resent him for the rest of your lives because you couldn't solve it yourself. Now, he said it in a very interesting way. We all learned that as high school kids. You never forgive the giver. I try to have a different attitude towards that. Someone wants to give me a box of cigars, I'll forgive them right away. But the point is that at the end of the day, we may not be doing a long-term service for some folks who could have fitted in or melded in, et cetera. And, you just can't uproot everybody without turning them to strangers the rest of their lives. And the idea that life in India or China or Pakistan or some goddamn camp in Pakistan, some camp of 2-3 million people, is an attractive destination. I don't believe it. I'd rather take my chances behind enemy lines. I mean, that's just no way to treat people, particularly as the world has really turned its back on the refugee problem. Europe's done with it. America will do it only because it's embarrassed to do so. Australia will only bring as many as they have to. But we're not opening the doors. And you know what? At the end of the day, whether it's borders closing over COVID or hearts and minds closing over refugees, I always thought the way we're treating each other today, whether it's COVID or refugee indifference, this is the dress rehearsal for climate change. When millions of people are on the move. And I'm talking about tens of millions of people are on the move. States within a country are going to close their borders like it didn't happen. Countries are going to knock them back. The Croatians and the Hungarians are going to put up barbed wire to keep them out. And that's when we're doomed, because, if we can't help each other, then I always believed when I was a kid that war and peace were indivisible. That is, if one group is suffering, we're all suffering. But people don't think like that anymore. That was a World War II thing that we all learned from Ronald Niebuhr and other theologians who tried to make some sense out of evil. That war and peace were indivisible. Well, today, people can divide things and they can close borders, whether it's to. And look at people today with COVID. They're considered demons. We demonize people who get COVID. Yeah. And we've demonized the refugees who might have been cooking bread for some NATO troops in Helmand province. We're demonizing these people. And we're finding ways to turn our back on these things. Frankly, there are a lot of countries that could use these people. I'm sure they're very smart and intelligent. It'll probably take them a generation to master the languages. And we got countries, that are suffering loss of population because of age. Japan, Germany, all the rest of them. And so I think they could be a wonderful infusion. But let's not imagine that we're doing them a big favor.
Yeah.
They're doing us a favor by coming. They're going to let us save them because we can't bear we can't bear the guilt of watching what might happen next.
Yeah.
And the Taliban are as advertised. They are as primitive as 7th and 8th century marauding Muslim armies. And back in the day, it's either join us or die. And my own people and my mother's crowd all came from Albania, which was called Illyria back in the day. And they were all thrown out of the country by the Ottoman Turks. They either convert or leave or die. So they left. And King Ferdinand offered these people safe passage in Sicily, which is why there are large communities of Albanians all over Sicily in the hills. And, King Ferdinand figured, well, these people are trappers and traders, and they're artists, and they're all kinds of things. And let's bring them in, see what happens. And so we're going to have these great migrations. But I just see in this turning our back on our fellow men, I can see the future. This is the dress rehearsal for the climate change and the damage that it's going to bring. There's no doubt about it. There are millions and millions of people who are going to die.
Yeah.
And we're going to turn our backs on them because there's no room. Well, I tell you what, when there's no room to help someone in danger, then maybe the story is over for a while. I mean, we need a heroic narrative. The heart of a nation is about how it treats its people. The soul of a nation is how it treats the Auslander, the stranger. And when we turn our backs on strangers, we're literally killing ourselves. At the end of the day, we make ourselves less human. And as soon as you are less human, you can justify anything in the world. This is why the world turned their back on the Jews in the 1930s. We don't want to know about it.
Yeah.
And particularly if the persecutor is successful. Hitler found himself on the cover of Time magazine. Joseph Stalin found himself on the cover of Time magazine. While they were absolutely bestial, they were saleable. They sold themselves as in charge. That was the price we paid. And so that was that trade-off we made between a respectable nation, that is a nation that moves among other nations, and how they treat their people. Can we treat people who treat their people as badly as this? I don't know. I know when the Ayatollah got in 79, the first thing he did was kick out the student radicals and the other people who didn't fit in with his theology. He wanted to turn it into a theological state. And same thing in Afghanistan. It'll become autocratic theology. Be run by the people at the top. And, some of it might even be good, Maybe they can get rid of the corruption and this thing and that thing. Some of it's going to look terrible.
Yeah.
Very bad optics.
Yeah.
But, can we live with this? I used to think life was easier before television and social media. We didn't have to dwell on it because we didn't see it. But when you see it, you can't get it out of your head.
Yeah. This is certainly a conversation that I think a lot of people are having today is, do people have the capacity to be able to handle this much information about what we are as humanity, now that we can get every piece of information that we want at our fingertips? I believe there's even a term, I've been discussing this with a friend of mine from Tasmania recently who's studying psychology. It's eco-anxiety, this deep withdrawal from the world because of the apocalyptic nature of what's happening everywhere all around us. And of course there is hope for us to be able to withstand this and to transform ourselves as we watch and understand what is happening. The question is, are enough of us paying attention to these patterns and seeing how we can transform in order to get through everything that's happening right now? And this is one of the reasons why I'm so glad to have you as I'm so glad to just allow you to just go off and tell me how you see it. Tell me how you see things at the moment. Because, when you pull all of these different patterns together and history, and when you pull philosophy into it, I think that we're getting a really balanced appraisal of this situation. And on top of that, I would not call you an ideologue, which is one of the biggest benefits that I think is, why I'd love to have you here, is because you're willing to say good things about Trump and bad things about Trump, good things about Biden, bad things about Biden. You're willing to call it how you see it. And you've said some things today that would shock some people. Like I want to make that statement that you said, I kind of like Saddam Hussein. I want that to be my ringtone. but it's statements like that.
It showed him as being very human. It showed him as a human being.
Yeah.
What bothered me about the war with Iraq was about the third day in on the American networks, it had this American army stopping at the banks of the Euphrates to pause. And I'm thinking, Jesus, what would Thomas Jefferson think about an invading army at the banks of the Euphrates near Babylon? I mean, we're a little bit out of our neighborhood, as a matter of fact. It just the scene of it just kind of, it was mind-boggling to think about what we were doing near Babylon, trying to save the world from something. But Saddam struck me as very human. He was a garden type tyrant, the kind we befriended during the Cold War and the interwar period. And he was controllable. He also hated bin Laden and Al-Qaeda because that would upset his plans. He wasn't into those guys, not at all, as a matter of fact. And so this tendency to demonize people, I think is very natural. By the way, on my ideology, I've been broadcasting this country since when I arrived in '73. I started doing a lot of work for the ABC when I was at the University of Queensland. So I go to the Tawong studio, and I was always on talking about Richard Nixon and Watergate. That's when I got my media career started picking up steam. And one day, then I got into a lot of trouble. I picked fights at royal commissions, and after a while, just have fun. But anyway, one day, this guy, this senior guy at the ABC whom I trusted, and back in those days, I used to do notes on the news on Tuesday. I used to do the evening editorial before the news. And this guy says to me, a lot of people don't like you. So I said, why? Because I don't care. And he said, because we can't put a label on you. We don't know what you're going to say. And he says, Australians must put people into boxes. They have to know what they're going to say. It drives them bloody crazy. And I took that as a high compliment. I just talk about, I follow the ball, not the man or the person hitting the ball. I follow the evidence. Donald Trump had some positives. His negatives, I could do without. On the other hand, Joe Biden had positives, and his negatives are coming out. He's not quite as senile as other people say he is, etc. But I know, after 77 years and 50 years in the real world, I know when people are in over their heads. And one of the things I'm trying to do before I leave this veil of tears is I'm trying to make sure we don't start a war with China, because there is no basis for a war. We have no obligation. No one's going to go to war over Taiwan, and everyone talks about a war with Taiwan because it's shopping time for the military-industrial complex. I want to shop for things. Same with the Chinese. They're not going to. They know we're not going to fight over Taiwan. And so I'm trying to educate people, but there are a lot of people in this country whose names I won't mention in high places who don't know what they're talking about. And I've had a gutful of watching morons getting us killed since I was a kid. I always told my students, be careful who you vote for. They can get you killed. And they can get you killed, as a matter of fact. So when I see these idiots in high places making mistakes and not having any people with a sense of history around them, or a sense of philosophy, or a sense of humility, and they all seem to be powered by, they're surrounded by people who tell them what they want to hear through the prism of public relations. So what they're all doing is, they're all blowing hot air at each other, and they're making terrible mistakes. When I told you that China's not going to last another 5 years, and there's not going to be a war with China. And then when I hear think tanks in this country saying, what we need is 50 F-35s and submarines. In the 70s, everyone said in this country that because Australia was an ally of the United States, that they were a nuclear target. That was the big story in the 70s and 80s. And then one day, the ABC had a Soviet general on their show, 7:30 report. This is, America has made us a nuclear target. Like in the noughties, America's made us a terrorist target. So this top guy at the ABC says to this guy, is Australia a nuclear target? Because we are allied with the United States. And this guy says to him, we don't think about Australia. We don't have to do anything. No one's coming here anyway. And, he just took the wind out of his sail. The Chinese don't think about invading Australia. The Russians never thought about invading Australia. Why? We're an island continent. If they want to do something, they can just cut off the sea lanes of communication and the goods. And, Australians will have to eat mango or whatever we do. And they don't worry about us. But Australians, because they are isolated in the Southwest Pacific, they think like Europeans, that we're under the gun here, that Russians are a threat, and they think that maybe the Chinese are a threat the way they thought the Vietnamese were a threat. And they're always expecting some Chinese or Japanese fleet to come through the Sydney Head and to announce they're taking over Australia. And they'd be here for the surrender. And I could just hear it, it'd be Kevin Rudd's type voice, a robot voice coming out of the speaker. Lay down your arms, we do no harm, and all that kind of stuff. And we're just not a target like that. There's nothing in it for anybody to plan against us. We are nearly irrelevant. We are, and if there wasn't an ANZUS treaty, Australians would make up an ANZUS treaty because they're holding on to the Americans like Linus held onto that blanket. It's the security blanket. The ANZUS treaty is the ultimate guarantor that Australia goes on. And as I say to my students, There is no guarantee that Australia goes on. There's nothing written in stone that says Australia has to last 1,000 years. There are a lot of ancient cultures, beginning with the Assyrians, the Egyptians, and the Romans, who knew more than we did, who disappeared from the face of the earth. So why do we think we're going to last forever? We have to be very clever. I don't know what we have to do exactly. And I always say to them, it's your generation that has to figure out how we're going to survive. So when I hear these think tanks say, we got to buy 50 F-35s, and they'll be delivered in 25 years, and they're going to arrive when the submarines arrive. By that time, Australia would be defeated, No one has to defeat Australia. You just buy the place, you don't have to invade the place. Anyway, there are a lot of people in top places. Maybe I'm just getting older, but they're looking dumber and dumber to me. They're surrounded by think tanks or by thinkers who aren't thinking very hard. Now, I know there are a lot of young people there. So I mentioned to you, if they knew something about how long communist parties last. And I'm just here using classic definitions, generation definitions. There are a lot of people in the intelligence community who know these things, but their objections or their insights don't get to the top. Top want to deal with something else. And if you said to students, if you knew anything about comparative communist systems, well, where would you study that in Australia? Or if you wanted to know about the ancient world, where would you study that in Australia? If you wanted to compare war and peace, where would you study in Australia? You couldn't. No one teaches it. You can't know anything about the 20th century without understanding the rise of Imperial Germany or Imperial Germany in 1914 and Nazi Germany in the 30s, or fascist Italy or Soviet Russia, which dominated the second half of the 20th century. And you can't, we don't teach Russian history anymore.
Yeah.
Kids study this, they're doing something else. And that's because the universities have turned out all these utilitarian degrees. They're saying, we're not going to teach the classics anymore in university. We're going to give people shovel-ready degrees so they can go out there and shovel.
Yeah.
Well, this, of course, is another story about what's happened at the universities. They've become very utilitarian. Instead of curious places for people to ponder the origins of how we got here, they're giving them these degrees in this false sense. And, we don't have public intellectuals in university saying, hey, we got to get back to some basics here.
Yeah.
Because most of the people who run universities tend to be corporate types, very talented, but ignorant as hell. They don't know anything about universities. They know a lot about, producing tires and widgets and stuff like that. They're not scholars. In fact, it's very sad what's going on. Anyway, you can't study these things. And if you can't understand the history of China or comparative communist systems, how can you understand what's going on in Xi's head? What I like about communists, Simon, is that communists think like communists. When I studied communist thinking in the early 60s, communists don't use rhetoric or flourish. They mean what they say. They are bound by Marxism, Leninism, and scientific language. So when they say something, it's very easy to understand what communists say because they mean it. In the West, we keep saying, we do one thing and we say, well, how's the rhetoric different from what we're doing? Well, that's because, the PR people have taken over the rhetoric. But with the communists think like communists. And so they're very easy to understand. There's nothing mysterious about their language. That's why I've always understood the Vietnamese mentality, and I understood the Soviet mentality. I understood how these, and yet we can't really, where would you study comparative communist systems today? Nowhere. Maybe a module somewhere. But, and we're not learning the things we should be learning, and we're not turning out young people who are curious. We're turning out utilitarian degrees so that they're shovel ready. They go right to work doing whatever they're going to do, and then they can start paying the government back. And this, of course, is the death of the universities in this country because of the privatization and deregulation of universities and the heavy debts of students. And we started to imagine we can transform universities into an export industry because we had all these Chinese kids coming here. And that fell over. We have here now, we're looking at the collapse of Australian universities. We got 37 of them. 17 of them won't survive. And the other 20, only 5 of those have any money in the bank to keep going. And so what they're doing is these universities have they got rid of 17,000 people in 18 months. Those are people with their PhDs, people who would nearly work for nothing. These guys to be casuals, they'd work for a Snickers bar plus a small check. They got rid of all these people, and there's no one to replace them. So we have entire generations of Australian scholarship, whether it's science or humanities, social sciences, that is empty. The nest is empty because the vice chancellors and the chancellors in this country, to cover up their sins, that is failure to think ahead, think outside the box when the funny money dried up, have fired all these people to cover the shortfall. But in covering the shortfall, they have gutted universities.
Yeah.
They don't know what they've done. And they're so stupid about it, they wouldn't even know what they've done. They've made business decisions. Universities are not business decisions. Universities are the overhead cost that one generation pays to the next, without which there is no survival. Full stop. These people don't understand this. As soon as you got started to get the privatization of industries in the 1980s, when universities were made exporters of education. And at the same time, in case anyone missed the point, everybody who got a degree had to pay for it. So we're exporting, and we were the 3rd largest exporter up to a couple of years ago, $34 billion a year. And the kids are paying for their degrees. Well, in the NATO countries, like France and Germany and Spain, people went to university for free because they're not stupid. You have to educate your young or you will die on the vine later on. We don't understand that here because we've allowed some very bad practices in the past. But, it's this lack of education and this failure to understand the world. I spent my whole life trying to explain the world to the world. And sure, people say, this guy's raving mad. Actually, I got 54 books, and 10 of which are used all over the world to understand diplomacy, nuclear weapons, and that kind of thing. And I get quoted more outside Australia than I do here. It's a sort of a joke, I was once introduced to an Indian audience 18 months ago by the foreign minister who says, "Oh, yes, I've read Joe's books." No one even reads my books here. Australians couldn't care. Academics have a problem in this country. If you got something good to say, there's this disease that my first wife used to call NIH. She worked for the Queensland government. If it's not invented here, they don't want to know about it. So there's a lot of good people in this country who have great reputations. And there are a lot of people in this country who have no reputations, who are not known beyond the 3-mile marker, who think they are running the academy of the world. No one knows them. And that's because they haven't done anything. If you haven't written a book, why should anyone know you? What's the point? If you don't hit the cricket ball or you don't hit a baseball bat, no one knows you because you didn't do anything. And so we got a bunch of know-nothings firing these 17,000 people to make up for the shortfall, to understand a world that they no longer understand. I mean, there should be, the thing is that there aren't many public intellectuals. When I started, there was Zelman Cowan and Gordon Greenwood and John Ward, and all the public intellectuals were very serious people who ran universities. Today, the people who run universities are not serious intellectuals.
Yeah,
they're guys on $1.2 million a year, thinking they're running businesses. And students aren't students; they are clients. And what we sell is export industry to other people, and so they don't kind of understand it. And so we have the universities are collapsing, and there are a lot of bright people in this country on the left. I know a lot of brilliant people on the left, but you notice for the last 20 years they've been silent. The silence of the left. The left could talk about the war on terror, the collapse of Afghanistan. They know more about these things than I do. And they couldn't be bothered because as postmodernists, they reckon that the chicken has come home to roost, that these are the sins of imperialism, and we deserve everything we get. So they're sitting in the background saying nothing. They're not smiling or anything, they're not happy about it. But they reckon that these are the sins of the father.
Yeah. And
that they were always coming. And so when I see the silence of the left, very bright people who have all kinds of solutions and ways of looking at things, whether it's bombs or the Palestinians, whatever it is. They're silent. They've gone silent. And I think, why is this? They're not part of the debate. And if you turn on your TV or radio sometime and you monitor for 1 week the public intellectuals, it's a handful of people, same people like me or Alexei Marioff at Curtin, very few of us make ourselves available. Or worse yet, you got some people who are happy to talk but don't know anything. So they fill in a lot of time too. But they're no serious people talking about what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how can Australians think seriously about the future or even understand what's happening right now without using your serious people? What I mean by serious people, people who understand how things work and they write about it and they talk about it and they teach about it. And, public intellectuals used to just share their knowledge. They didn't tell you how to vote one way. Public intellectuals' knowledge is neutral. They're just telling you what they see, not telling you what to do. And there's almost that silence on the left. And I'm very sad about that because these guys and women, they're very smart. But they're just taking a break on this one as the world sort of stumbles down this postmodern, post-imperial period. They know what's coming. I mean, they can see this coming. They want to do nothing about it. So, I mean, and Australia has an important role to play. As a small nation, it has to play an important role. It has to be seen to be important. Australia may be small, but there's no reason for not doing anything. And what we're doing is pathetically small. We bring out 360 interpreters. What is that? An interpreter for every special service guy? I mean, we only had about 500 people there. We got 300 interpreters. I love some of these interpreters. They can barely speak English. I'm thinking, who are they interpreting for? Trying to get the last train out of Brooklyn. That's what they're trying to do. So we got a lot of funny things going on right now. But look, I don't see the collapse of Afghanistan as the end of the American experiment. It's going to go on. The Afghans will go on. They will find a way. As eternally, they will have to find a way, as they've always found a way. But we have people on the move, and we have to do something about that. Millions of people on the move.
Yeah.
Do we want to do anything about it? And can we hide behind COVID? I don't know how long you can hide behind the COVID hard borders between states. That only goes so far. Yeah. But we have problems that are going to overwhelm us. And I think Australia can survive and prosper in the years ahead. We just have to be a little smarter, and we have to solve some problems. And I think it's important to push the envelope, whether it's climate change or this thing or that thing. And my job as a historian, I've always thought the most important thing I can do for any public debate, and I don't have any damn solutions. If I had a solution, I'd be betting my money in the stock market.
Well, I think just information is almost as good a solution. It's
my job, my sacred job, is to explain how we got to this point. That's what I can do. That's what Toynbee did, and all the people around him in the 30s. They could explain how we got to this point. And then we count on the bright young people to be the science cutting edge and whatever it is. I just want to tell people how we got to this point. And when people start to make decisions that disconnect from the reality of the past, for example, half the country wants to go to war, think there's a war with China, when there's never going to be a war with China. It's going to be a cover to buy machines or guns and planes that we don't need and stuff like that. Unless people can make these connections, they're going to tolerate very mediocre leaders who claim they have a monopoly of knowledge. And Australians are, Australians are very brave. If 100 of them walk by a swimming pool and you're drowning, every 100, all of them would jump in and save you. But if you have a public issue that's crying out, whether it's refugees or whatever it is, Most Australians stay away from it. They don't want to be painted with the brush. They want to stay away from it. I don't know whether it's an Australian thing or they picked it up from the Brits, or I don't know where this comes in the DNA. But when it comes to standing up and being counted, Australians are very timid about this kind of thing. And it's not because they're not brave. They're very brave. But they don't want to stand up for a principle or something like that. I came to this country thinking, you got to stand up when people are being badly treated or they're being denied natural justice. And I did that a couple of times, and I took on the High Court of Australia and won, but I didn't win any awards. It's painted with the brush. But I noticed that Australians don't want to get involved in the large questions. And I don't know why. I don't know why. But we have to make universities more attractive again. We have to solve some problems, and we have to be seen to be solving some problems. To say that we're just going to take home 360 interpreters while 38 million people are going down the crapper, I don't think that's the answer. I don't think that's the answer. I think we can do a little bit more than that in terms of opening our hearts and minds, to what's going on, or at least to understand how we got there. I heard some Australian guy say that he was sent to Afghanistan to understand the mind of the terrorist. And by observing. And I'm thinking, I always tell the cops and the ASIO people, not the ASIO, but the federal police, the war on terror is the war of our generation. It's going to require constant vigilance, like nuclear non-proliferation and all the rest of it. And I always say to them, they always say this terrorism thing, this is new. We haven't had to deal with this. I say, no. I said to the Australian Federal Police once, terrorism's been around a long time. Okay, it's been around since Christ and before Christ, for all I know. And I said that we have wonderful examples of why terrorists do the things they do, whether they are anarchists from the 1890s, early 1900s, or the nihilists in Russia, or the terrorists in Europe in the 30s, or the Baader-Meinhof gang or the Red Brigade. I said, we have all this literature telling us who these people are and why these young people give up their lives for these causes. I said, this is all part of the same cloth. So, they gave millions of dollars in this country to people to count the words that terrorists use on the internet to recruit somebody, when in fact we have entire examples of youth who followed this path, okay? Whether they're Nazis or fascists or Red Brigade. The Italians came down on the Red Brigade, and there hasn't been an assault, a terrorist assault on Italian soil since the 1970s. The Germans came down on the Baader-Meinhof gang. This is what I told the federal police. And you guys never consult that literature. You think everything's brand new because you don't know anything. Most Australians, God bless them, when it comes to terrorism, they are ahistorical. They don't know anything happened before 9/11. So 9/11 produced all these instant experts. And I always say to them, the Italian model is perfect. It tells you exactly what you have to do. Same thing with the West German model with the Baader-Meinhof gang. And then I said to the federal police, all kind of tall, hard-drinking, Irish-looking guys. I'd say, but that would require you to learn Italian or German. And we know you're not going to do that because you don't like wogs. So what you're going to do is you're going to pretend the terrorist is brand new, and you're going to follow the rubber ball, the bouncing ball, because now you got something you can control. And in fact, these people, these kinds of people have been around. I wrote a book once with a Japanese neuroscientist who reckons that this is all part of the neurons. Certain kinds of people respond to authority. Some of them resist authority. It's been around for thousands. He calls it the plasticity in the brain. Not that I understood that exactly, but I did a book with an Irish defense lawyer, a Japanese neuroscientist, and I did the political history. It's like a Chicago joke. I went into a bar with a Japanese guy and an Irishman, and I came out with a book on neuroscience and the war on terror. That's what the book is called, Neuroscience. And when we produced the book, got these rave reviews in a field called biosecurity. I never heard of the field biosecurity. Mm-hmm. And this guy said, "This is a classic." And I didn't know it was a classic. I just was swimming along with everybody else. But the point is, we tried something different, okay? And I think getting to the mind of the terrorist is very easy if we knew any history. You know, when the Italians interviewed the Red Brigade, they brought in his mother, father, the housekeeper, the gardener, and the barber. And they interrogated them till they found out what they wanted, you know? Full court press. And when the Germans wanted to get the Baader-Meinhof gang, they did exactly what they had to do to get this information, to break the mold. We don't follow these examples. The Italians, they say, just think about it. Not a major attack on their soil since they killed that Italian president, Moro, in 50 years. What do the Italians know about counterterrorism that we don't know? A great deal. But Australians don't want to pretend the Italians know anything because it's not English. It didn't come from the British or the Americans. You notice the 5 eyes, the intelligence community. Australia, New Zealand, America, Britain, and Canada. It's all English. God forbid you'd have to learn a foreign language to get to the heart of other solutions. You know, God forbid. You know, what Australian wants to study a foreign language? You know, they avoid it like the plague. Though some are quite heroic about Chinese. The point is, we got all the talent we need. We just don't have a lot of people who are leading them in the right direction. And we get very mediocre governments that say they can solve things. But I've been here 48 years. I came for 3, by the way. And I went the distance. And I'm going to finish up here. Because this is this country has some of the brightest young people I've ever seen come through the university. Now, you know, I've written over 50 books, but that's nothing. I've had 50 PhD students who've gone on to be ambassadors, prime minister in cabinet, premier in cabinet. They've gone on to do things. These are people who think for a living. I'm very proud of them because they're my legacy, you know. They live on, you know, they're going to ask the hard questions. You know, once I showed them how to get here, I left them at the cutting edge. They have to figure out how to solve these problems. And I'll tell you what, it's well within our means to be able to do this. I had a mentor at the University of Queensland, and who was the son of a very famous minister. I won't mention any names. And every time I said to Gordon, you know, how's this problem going to be solved? Or how's this going to, you know, he's a big expert in international affairs. And he used to say that his father said to him, we all have it within our means to save ourselves and our neighbors. If only we could call on some divine authority. And you know, these people who can't solve problems, they have no core. They don't have a core. They don't have a core. You know, these terrorists, they're hardcore Islamists. Yeah. You know, they're Islamists first and terrorists second. And this guy used to say, we have our salvation is in our hands if we want to survive. And he's the guy who gave me that line that the only reason Australia was founded is because the Brits no longer had a place to throw their troublesome Irish. They used to send them to Georgia in the New World. And because of that, they invented this world. No, Australia doesn't belong here, he says. It's an accident. Shouldn't be here. It's a disconnect. And when Gough Whitlam wanted to go to South America in the early 70s, he came by my boss's office to get his little book he wrote on Australia and Latin America. He wrote the first book about Australia looking to that part of the world. And the Prime Minister of Australia shows up at this old timer's door just to get the damn book because it was written in 1944. And I thought, now that's pretty cool. Can you see a Prime Minister today knocking on some older academic's door to get a book he can't find. I can't even imagine a prime minister today who reads. It's just maybe Turnbull read a little bit, but I don't see it. It's a different way of thinking. Anyway, I think we have a lot of talent in this country. We just got to set it loose, and we're not sure how to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well. Have I done enough today?
This has been a hardcore commentary on so many issues that are going on at the moment. But I just can't wait to continue these conversations with you, because I think that I can safely say that everybody should probably listen to this 2 or 3 times to try and get a lot of these things in, because you move from one idea to the next very quickly, but everything is tightly packed with important detail.
Well, I know it looks like I'm moving around. Some people would say that's discursive, but
there's themes, there's patterns, and people will see them.
When I think I'm an intellectual, only in the sense that I play with ideas and I look at events and try to make sense of them. But there is, to the great historical minds, what I like about your show is it allows me to sort of order my stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
When I'm talking about events today and I can sheet it back to something that happened 2,500 years ago, that's exactly how my mind works.
Yeah.
I see this and I see that. And I know the choice the Afghan people have, the same choice as the people of Mios. Either pay attention to me or you disappear.
Yeah.
So they have to make the hard choice. But I told you, I met an entire generation of young people behind the Iron Curtain who decided I'm better read than dead, because they knew the day would come, and it did come.
Well, I
asked these kids in East,
sorry, go on.
I asked these kids in East Germany, what was it that allowed you to bring that wall down? What was it? Was it President Eisenhower, President Kennedy's famous speech in Berlin? What was it that attracted you, that prompted you to tear this wall down? Because at the time, the East Germans were going to call in the Russian tanks. These guys took a big chance. And this young girl and guy said to me, it was the lyrics of the Western songs, the American and the British songs. He said you could feel the freedom between the lines. You could feel the freedom between the lines. And I thought, what an incredible observation for these kids to make. They could intuit that there was freedom somewhere else because of what was between the lines. And I thought, wow, it just kind of knocked me down when I saw that, when I heard that for the first time. And I understood these people. When I was in Czechoslovakia, in Prague about 2 years ago, they were talking about when the Soviets were there. And of course, half of your Czech intellectuals are trained in Russian universities, speak perfect Russian. First cousins to the Russians, some of them even nostalgic about losing the Soviet Union. And I said to these people at a panel, I said, and the conference took place in a building that was the Department of Foreign Affairs. In 1936, it became Nazi Gestapo headquarters, okay? Famous building. And then it became KGB headquarters. And I said to them, look, you've had the Nazis here, occupied Czechoslovakia. Then you had the Red Army here, and now they're gone. I said, do you have committees of reconciliation and forgiveness? And how do you revert property back to its original owners? So there must be a lot of people claiming they're trying to claw back their properties. And this top guy says to me, we don't want to go down that road. It's too messy. And I thought, they decided to solve the problem by ignoring the problem. And maybe that's their solution. Small country, we don't want reconciliation commission. We don't want to talk about collaborating with the Nazis or collaborating with the Russians. We don't want about stealing people's houses and all the rest of it. He said, we don't want to go down that road. And that's because they're all guilty about it and they all participated. That's what I reckon. So they decided the best way to solve a problem is to say you solved the problem and move on. That is a solution. Or, the great thinkers say, to do nothing is an option. And that's what they've chosen to do. But, Australia and the Southwest Pacific, surrounded by people whose population trebles the Australian population every year, do we have options? We either have to play a role or someone will give you a role. There's a famous line that I heard once that if you don't think about your security and well-being, then you're not going to have security and well-being. It's going to be something you dreamed about, you could have done something about. So Australians, they're in a position to do important things. As indeed people in medicine in this country, they make worldwide contributions, but the rest of them, not so much. And it's, I would expect governments, you see in France and Britain, they attract bright young men and women to work with them. In Australia, the bright people don't gravitate towards public service or working with governments. They go into medicine or they go into the law or something. They just disappear. You don't attract the really bright people. Don't get me wrong, a lot of bright people are there. But, you don't. And if you don't attract your best and the brightest, then you don't have a hope of surviving. Yeah. It's not possible. Some dullard is not going to get you through. And I once talked to an old digger in Britain, when I got to Australia. And I arrived in February 73. It was hot summer. And I had a next door neighbor named Mr. Morgan. I didn't know anything about Australia. You couldn't buy a book about Australia in America because there were no books about Australia. Aside from, a chapter in the British Commonwealth. And Australia was always the economic chapter. Australia, because of its uranium reserves, is the Saudi Arabia of the 21st century. That's how it began. So I talked to this guy who was in his 80s. And he was, your friendly next door neighbor, sort of curious about where the hell I'd come from New York with a new family. One day I said to my wife, I yelled to her, we got a lemon tree out front, out in the back. And I hear this voice, mandarins, not lemons. So we became buddies. And it turns out that when he was a youngster, he was the guy who took care of the horses on the way to Gallipoli in the Middle East. He was one of the horse guys. And he went to this place called Gallipoli. I hadn't heard of Gallipoli. You don't read about Gallipoli in American history books. It's just, it's a British thing. It's the British history. That's what you read about. And he told me people were fearful that the Japanese were going to conquer the North. And because, a lot of academics said Japan never had any intention of invading Australia, which is a nonsense. Everybody who lived in Queensland expected the Japanese. In fact, I unearthed a document which I published. It was in early 42, where Guy Royal, who was head of the armed forces, tells the Curtin government, or the Menzies Curtin government, that the road to Australia lay open, tell people to stay in their homes. They were going to concede Japanese invasion. Anyway, I released that document, and he told me when he was growing up in the north of Queensland, his father had told him that when the Japanese come over the hill, he was to slit the throat of his brothers and sisters, and then his father would slit his throat and then his throat, so the Japanese wouldn't get them. Australians aren't stupid. They knew in the early 40s what Japan had done in China, and they knew they were in for the ride. And I was sort of astounded at how dramatic, he was telling me very interesting things in a nonchalant Australian way. And I said, what if the Japanese had come over the hill? What would Australia have done? He said half of Australia would have surrendered to the Japanese without a fight. And they would have made sure the other half didn't fight either. I said, is that correct? He said, yeah. He says, they wouldn't have fought. They would have just, because they were overwhelmed, And I thought, I've heard from scholars that there was no Japanese threat, which isn't true, because I got Guy Royal's own memo to prove it. And he says that if the Japanese had come through the Sydney Head, half of Australia would have surrendered, that he cut the deal. That's how close we are, because once the threat comes, whether it's a pathogen or an invading navy, whatever it is, I think the Australian public, in the absence of really bright young leadership, would divide right down the middle. Half might just cave because there is no way out. The other half would think of some way out. I don't know. But here's this guy, a kid in a boat with horses on his way to Gallipoli, telling me that half of Australia's 7 million people would have cooperated with the Japanese, the way half of the French cooperated with the Nazis. That just knocked me down. I mean, he believes it in his heart. He believes it in his heart. And I'm thinking, what an important message he's telling me. In his own lifetime, he could see that the nation was on the threshold, was on the cusp. And I thought, I always used to tell my students, talk to your grandparents before they go. They got great stories to tell you, stories you've never heard before. But they never did, I suppose. I was fascinated. But, he knew, I was going to say, that Australia was having an existential moment. I hate that phrase, existential, because there is no existential. Only the dinosaurs had an existential moment. We've never had one. We don't know what the hell it is. It's just crap when people say we're having an existential moment. But he knew that the future of the country was determined by a sliver. It was the Battle of Coral Sea, of course, that turned the tide. And I thought, wow, he's this great insight. This guy, he was nearly 80 when I met him. His parents were Australians. They were the original people. I don't mean the original British. And he was telling me this important insight. And if you said today half of Australia would cave, you would say that's not true. Well, actually, it is true. Because, in the absence of bright young people who understand the way out, and the way out is to think outside the box, think of the solution, hit above, John Howard's famous phrase, hit above your weight. That's exactly true. That's exactly true. And Australia can't hit above its weight if it doesn't understand history, philosophy, the purpose of universities, or realize the potential of its own young people. And, because universities today make this very, very difficult, in fact, some of the courses they offer are just crap, shovel-ready crap. And unless we have this renaissance of universities and this rebooting of Australia's mentality about how to think about the world, we're going to be in serious trouble. Does anybody really think today that not allowing a family to leave some kind of island to come to Australia makes a difference? I heard today from Australians and Americans, how people need paperwork to get out of Kabul? This one Australian and American guy said a pay slip will do it. You imagine being able to leave your home country to go to a place like Australia, which is uptight about jumping the queue, on a pay slip? Can anybody see the humor there? You can get to Australia now with your old pay slip. It's extraordinary, All of a sudden, these barriers to getting here have disappeared. Extraordinary, just extraordinary.
Yeah.
Well, that's my bit for today. When are we going to do this again?
2 weeks from now. That would be amazing. And I'm very excited for this, Joe. This has been such an enlightening.
This would just be the same conversation we had if we were in a bar having a beer.
Yeah.
But I had a cup of coffee. You had some water or whatever. And
so we'll have to have one where we focus a bit more on the COVID side of things, maybe the universities, your thoughts on China. We can go deeper and deeper into that. But
well, the China
also,
thing ought to be looked at because I mean, Australians are getting a lot of crap about us at China. They don't know what to think about this.
yeah,
And if you look at the think tanks, they all tell you we're on the cusp of war. That's not true. If there's a war, it's going to be over. Freedom of navigation.
yeah.
But the fact that Australians are using the China war to go shopping, this is what happens when you identify someone as tomorrow's enemy. Then you get your shopping list, your military-industrial shopping list. You can get anything you want. You can get submarines. You can get F-35s. You can get anything you want. That's what people do is they hype up these scares, and the Chinese are not coming here that way.
Yeah.
And people think that China is singling out Australia. They're giving them the business. Well, the Chinese are doing the same thing to the Ukrainians. They make it very clear that unless they take their name off that anti-Uyghur list, they're not going to get their vaccine shots. And Chinese are pushing people around everywhere. I mean, Australia's not in for the special treat. Now, I was asked the other day by about some guys writing an important article about iron ore, because the Chinese are stopping iron ore production. They're reducing it in their own country to knock out some monopolies, and they're increasing their iron ore production or purchases from Australia, which Australia regards as a good thing. It's now about $38 billion, and people are saying, well, the Chinese need our iron ore no matter what we say or what they say or do. And of course, what people here haven't figured out yet is that the Chinese are increasing their purchase of iron ore from this country to make up for the shortfall as they punish their price riggers over there, because the people who produce iron ore there, they're into price fixing. They're coming down very hard on the billionaires. By buying more and more iron ore from Australia, which everybody here thinks they need us, what they don't realize is they have Australia addicted to these purchases. And when they go elsewhere, and they will go elsewhere, and the iron ore suffers a calamitous reduction. See, Australia is being fed like an opioid addict. They want more iron ore. We can't do anything wrong. So instead of diversifying, they've fallen for it. They just need us more than we need them. It's a mistake. I don't understand how these people work. And that's because a good communist does exactly what they say they're going to do. They're going to buy more from us so they can punish their own iron ore producers to tamp down the monopolistic practices. And then when the time comes, they're going to take the iron ore purchases from Australia away, and we're going to fall over in that direction, the iron ore business. Same thing with international education. Third highest export, we counted on it, and now we don't have any. And should we have seen that coming? Absolutely. Should we have seen this coming? Absolutely. But what's happened is that this is ancient history too. The Chinese are counting on Australians' competitiveness, that is, we have to beat other people to it, and Australia's greed, like other businessmen. The greed. This is something the Romans and the Greeks and everybody else know, that the greed never changes. Human nature hasn't changed in 3,000 years. They're counting on Australian greed. First, it was the greedy vice chancellors. Now it's the greedy iron ore producers. And when they pull that one, they got us. They got us by the short hairs. They were being played. And everybody says, we're indispensable. Not to these guys. We're not indispensable. But anyway, we'll save that for another day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a date night coming up in half an hour, so I've got to get going. But
okay, you enjoy yourself.
Send me your address. I've got some cigars to send to you, and
that's excellent. Send me my address immediately.
Yeah.
You know what? I just tell you a quick story before you go off your day.
Yeah, please.
I have a brilliant Pakistani student, an older guy who just finished his PhD. And he went back to Islamabad to take up his job. He had a job in the university, but he had to get a degree with me on nuclear weapons. And he says to me, can you help me publish this from Pakistan? I said, of course I can help you publish it. I have 50 students, and I helped 40 of them publish their theses because it has to be revised. And he said, I really want to thank you. And I said to him, while you're thanking me, I want a box of Romeo and Juliet cigars from Alexander's in Turak. He said, really? I said, really? I said, you know, I don't work for free. We're not sipping from the, you know, we're not sipping drugs here or anything. I said, I want to help you, but now that I'm semi-retired, you know, people used to use rum as currency or good cigars, whatever it is. I don't care. And the point is, he said, I didn't get your first message because the internet was turned down because I got it 3 days later. I said, have you got my message? And I said, okay, I'll buy it. Why was your internet in Pakistan turned down? Because he said it was a Muslim holiday. He mentioned it in great length, what it was, and, you know, after this grandson of the Prophet, etc. And there's a lot of rowdiness on the streets. And that what the government does is for 24 hours is they close down social media and the internet so as not to create public disturbances for people to gather or make a fuss. He said it's done for public order. So you know what? I thought to myself, this man bothered to learn English. He studied with me. He mastered nuclear weapons and why they're sold and all the rest. And I was too stupid to know that when they have these Muslim holidays, they close down the internet. And I was really impressed that he knows so much about us. And I'm ignorant about why an entire country closes down social media and the internet in order to maintain public order in one of these Muslim holidays that I don't understand. I'm thinking, this is a great lesson for us, isn't it? That we're just stupid about these parts of the world. They know so much about us. And I learned so much about him because he told me in a very straightforward, courteous way. What he was really saying is, look, dummy, I'm going to tell you what's going on here, okay? And he explained it very simply to me, very gently. But, you know, in a way, he was telling me, don't even ask a question like that unless you know a little more about what the answer might be. And I think it's a great lesson for us, is that we're dealing with people who know a great deal about us in South Asia, but we don't know much about them. You know, it's a very humble lesson, you know, and I take it well. You know, he was telling me something that I should know something about, and I didn't know it. And I thought, that's today's lesson, you know, just be humble about what you can learn about the world.
I would just have to say that if you're saying that you were ignorant, you're setting way too high a standard for everybody else who's listening to this, because that is not what we would necessarily class you as. But
you see, I was making some smart aleck allusion to, you know, he wasn't paying his bills or it doesn't work well there, but he wanted me to know it worked just fine.
Yeah.
They use it to control public order.
Yeah.
And see, I was going to make a joke about it, but it wasn't a joke. Okay, off you go. Have a good time.
Good on you, Joe. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you
bye-bye.
soon. Hey there, YouTubers. I just wanted to let you know that if you love this episode and you'd like many more just like it, then you can head to patreon.com/Simon J.E. Drew. There you'll get access to exclusive episodes that haven't been released yet, as well as many other benefits. Also, if you'd like to work one-on-one with me in my coaching practice, then you can head to simonjedrew.com/coaching. Talk to you soon.